On my wedding day, I walked in with a black eye. My fiancé smiled at my mother and said she needed to learn. The room laughed. Then I did something no one expected. I walked into my own wedding with a black eye. Concealer covered most of it. Megan had spent 20 minutes on my face that morning, her hands moving with careful precision. She didn't cry. She didn't lecture me. She just blended and buffed and pressed her lips together. When she was done, she looked at me in the mirror for a long moment. "We can still leave," she said. "Not yet," I said. She looked at me the way people look at someone standing too close to the edge of something. Then she handed me my bouquet. What she didn't know, what nobody knew except me, was that inside that bouquet, tucked between the white gardenias and the eucalyptus sprigs, was a small envelope. Inside the envelope were photographs. And the photographs were the reason I had not left the night before when I probably should have. I had a reason to stay. I needed the room. I'd been with Daniel Mercer for 3 years before the wedding. I want to tell you I missed every red flag. That I was naive. That I had no idea. But that would be a convenient lie. And I'm done with those. The truth is that the flags were there. I just had a very good reason to be practiced at not seeing them. I grew up in my mother's house, which meant I grew up inside a very particular reality distortion field. My mother, Catherine, is the kind of woman that other people describe as formidable. She chairs charity committees. She knows the Mayor D at the best restaurant in town by his first name. She wears pearls to things where other women wear regular jewelry, and somehow it never looks overdressed. She has a voice that could cut crystal and the self-possession of someone who has never once been made to feel that she might be wrong about something. My father died when I was 11. His name was Robert, and he was kind. He's the reason I have an aunt named Linda, who has been the only consistently safe adult in my life since I was old enough to understand what safe meant. After my father died, it was just Catherine and me. I learned very young to read the room. I learned to anticipate. I learned to adjust and apologize and smooth things over before they could escalate. Because when things escalated with my mother, there was always a cost. And the cost was always mine to pay. What that training produced in me was a woman who was exceptionally good at managing difficult people, calm under pressure, quick to de-escalate, skilled at making others comfortable at my own expense. If you met me at a party, you would probably describe me as easy to be around. What it also produced was a woman who thought, he's not that bad, was a reasonable standard for a partner. Daniel was handsome in a reliable way, an engineer, structured and logical, the kind of man who was always 10 minutes early and had opinions about kitchen organization. He was not unkind in the beginning. He was careful with me in the ways that mattered initially and careless with me in the ways I didn't yet recognize as mattering. The first time he laughed at my mother's expense, at my expense really, because the joke was about something I'd done that my mother disapproved of, I thought it was nerves. He wanted her to like him. Lots of people tried to make my mother like them. It was an understandable impulse. The second time, I told myself he didn't understand the history. The third time, I started keeping a notes app on my phone. Not formally. Not with the intention of billing a case. Just the particular habit of a woman who grew up in Catherine's house, writing things down so they couldn't be rewritten later. That notes app would matter more than I knew. The seeing chart fight started on a Wednesday, 11 days before the wedding. My mother had decided unilaterally, without consulting me, that her country club friends should be in the front rows of the ceremony hall. This would mean moving my Aunt Linda to the back. Aunt Linda, my father's sister, the woman who had driven 6 hours to be at my college graduation when my mother had a charity luncheon she couldn't miss. It's optics, my mother said on the phone with the tone of someone explaining something basic to someone slow. The Hendersons are in the process of donating to the hospital foundation. I need them where the photographer will catch them. Aunt Linda's family, I said. She's Robert's family, said with the specific inflection that had always followed my father's name. A slight emphasis, the tiny pause, the implication that anything belonging to him was categorically less significant than anything belonging to her. Linda is my family. She stays in the 3rd row. Hendersons can sit in the 5th. Olivia, no. Mom, yes. The silence on the line had a temperature, cold and pressurized. We'll discuss it in person, she said. We discussed it in person on a Thursday night at her house over a dinner that she had prepared with the pointed care of someone building a stage set. Fine wine, the good china, the atmosphere of a reasonable conversation between 2 mature adults, right up until the moment it wasn't. At 9:14 p.m., I said no for the final time and stood up to leave. My mother grabbed my arm. I pulled away. Her right hand swung back with the momentum of the pull, and the diamond cluster on her ring finger, the ring my father had given her, the ring she had never once removed, caught me across the cheekbone on the way back. I stood completely still. She stood completely still. The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds. Then her voice came, practiced, wearing the familiar shape of a line I had heard my entire childhood. Look what you made me do. I left without speaking. I drove home with one hand on the wheel and one pressed flat against my face. Not because it was that painful, but because I needed to feel something concrete and real. In my kitchen, I stood under the light and looked at myself in the dark window over the sink. There was already a mark forming. Not a full bruise yet, but the shadow of one. I called Megan first. She came over in 20 minutes with a first aid kit and her phone camera and the matter-of-fact efficiency of a woman who had been my best friend for 14 years. She had heard enough about my mother to not be surprised, which was its own kind of grief. She photographed my face. Timestamp, 10:03 p.m. 4 images, different angles. Her phone's metadata embedded the date and location automatically. Then she handed me her phone and let me forward the photos to myself. I'll keep copies, she said. I know, I said. Then I called Daniel. Here's what I told myself about Daniel and my mother, that he was trying, that he found her intimidating the way most people did, at his gentle suggestions. Just apologize, Olivia. It's easier that way. She's not going to change. You're the one who has to decide if it's worth it. Came from a place of wanting peace, not from a place of alliance. I told myself that the night he laughed genuinely and fully when she had called my career a very sweet hobby at Christmas dinner. I told myself he hadn't heard her correctly. I told myself a lot of things. I had been telling myself things my whole life. I was exceptionally good at it. So when I called Daniel at 10:47 p.m. with my voice shaking and told him what had happened, that my mother's ring had caught my face, that Megan had photographed the bruise, that I didn't know what to do, I was not prepared for what he said. He told me to get some rest. We'll deal with it after the ceremony. After the ceremony, I repeated. It's 11 days away. Let's just get through it, and then we can have a real conversation about boundaries with your mother. I sat with the phone against my ear for a moment, feeling something shift. Not yet understanding what the shift was, just feeling it somewhere below the level of language. Okay, I said. I should not have said okay. But that night, I opened the Notes app and typed everything. Exact time of the incident. Exact words she had said. Exact words Daniel had said. I made it clinical and specific, the way I had learned to make things when I needed them to be real later. Then I opened my email and sent the photographs to myself, to Megan, and to one other address. That address belonged to my Aunt Linda. 4 days before the wedding, I had a scheduled appointment with Dr. Priya Nambai. She had been my therapist for 3 years. She held a doctoral degree and had a practice specializing in family systems and relational trauma, which is the professional way of saying she worked with people whose families had broken them in specific and repeating patterns. I had been seeing her since 6 months into my relationship with Daniel, initially because I had what I described as a hard few months. What she had gently and persistently helped me understand was a pattern of hypervigilance and people-pleasing that I had carried since childhood. I showed her my face at our Thursday session. The bruise was yellow-green by then, still visible at the edges of concealer. She asked me how I was feeling about the wedding. I told her about the phone call with Daniel, about after the ceremony, about the particular cold logic of a man who had been told his fiancée had been hurt by her mother and had responded by asking her to wait. She was quiet for a long moment. Olivia, she said carefully, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it before you answer. I nodded. When you think about Daniel's relationship with your mother, not specific incidents, but the overall shape of it, what word comes to mind? I thought about it. The word that came was aligned. I said it out loud and heard it in a different way than I had expected. Not he tries to get along with her. Not he manages her well. Aligned. Like two things that had been calibrated to point the same direction. I drove home and opened the Notes app. I started reading from the beginning. There were 43 entries, small things and large things, going back 2.5 years. A Christmas dinner comment. The times he had suggested I apologize first. The time I had tried to talk about my mother and he had said, "You've told me the story 3 times, Olivia." The time he had used my mother's exact phrasing, "You're being emotional," without seeming to notice it was her phrasing. The time I had looked across a room at a party and seen the two of them talking close and easy in a way that stopped when I approached. 43 entries. I sat on my kitchen floor and read all of them. Then I called Megan. I need you to photograph my face again, I said. And I need to tell you something about tomorrow. The envelope in my bouquet was Megan's idea. I want to be clear about that because she deserves credit for the specific elegant look of it. I had the photos, I had the plan loosely, but Megan was the one who said, put them somewhere you can reach during the ceremony, in case you need them right then and there, in case there's no time to think. In case of what? I said. She looked at me with the particular patience of a woman who had been watching this situation for 2 years longer than I had. In case of whatever happens that you can't predict, she said, which with your mother is always something. The photos in the envelope, 4 images of my face from the night of the incident, time-stamped, geolocated, taken on Megan's phone with automatic metadata. 3 screenshots of my mother's text messages from the following morning. One telling me to cover the mark before the ceremony. One asking if I had calmed down yet. One that said simply, "This is what happens when you don't listen." That last one was the one I kept coming back to. There was also a 4th document in the envelope, which I had printed at a copy shop the morning of the wedding. 1-page letter written by Dr. Nambai on her professional letterhead, describing in neutral clinical language that I was a patient of hers, that I had disclosed a pattern of coercive behavior by a family member over the course of our therapeutic relationship, and that I had presented to our session on the date in question with visible facial bruising consistent with my account of events. Dr. Nambai had been careful about what she included. She had cleared it with me line by line. This isn't a legal document, she told me, but it's a professional one. It has my credentials and my license number. Anyone who sees it will know it's not something you fabricated. I folded it twice and tucked it behind the photographs. Megan drove us to the venue. Neither of us talked very much. The ceremony hall was soft with flowers and candlelight. 100 guests, white chairs in rows, programs on the seats. The kind of golden light that venues charge extra for, that Instagram was basically invented to photograph. I walked in on the arm of my Aunt Linda, my father's sister. She had not been told the full plan, but she had been told enough. She walked with the careful uprightness of a woman bracing for something. I felt them noticing my face. Not everyone, but enough. The slight head tilts. The quick exchanges of glances between couples. The smiles that arrived a half-second late because their faces had to travel through "something is wrong" before landing on an appropriate expression for a wedding. My mother sat in the front row in pale blue with pearls, looking exactly like a woman people admire at things like this. She didn't flinch when she saw me. She looked at my face with a specific calm that I recognized. The calm of someone who had already decided how the story was going to go and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. Daniel stood at the altar, tall, well-dressed. The expression of a man who was exactly where he had expected to be, everything going according to plan. I reached him. I turned to face him. I waited for the feeling that had once made me trust him. That particular warmth that I had spent 3 years describing to myself as love and had only recently begun to examine more carefully. His eyes slid past me. To my mother, he smiled, small, contained. The smile of 2 people sharing a joke that the rest of the room hadn't heard yet. The efficient, Reverend Claire Holloway, who had done a pre-ceremony meeting with both of us and was now watching Daniel's expression with something in her face I couldn't quite read, opened her mouth to begin. Daniel spoke first, loud, clear, loud enough for the room. "It's so she learns." One full second of absolute silence while 100 people processed what they had just heard. Then the laughter came, uneven at first. The uncomfortable ripple of people who aren't sure if a joke is landing right. And then, because enough people laughed fully and easily, because the social permission spread, filling the room. My mother pressed her lips together in a performance of disapproval. Her eyes said something completely different. Megan was behind me. I felt, rather than heard, her intake of breath. I turned to face Daniel. "What did you just say?" His expression shifted. Not embarrassment, irritation. The specific irritation of a man who has made a calculation and is annoyed that it's being interrupted. "Don't start this now," he said it low and controlled. "We're in the middle of the ceremony. Tell them what you meant." He leaned in close enough that his voice was low, but the acoustics of the room carried it anyway. The venue was small, and the sound was designed to travel. And I want to believe that was luck, but some part of me knew where to stand. "Your mom said you needed to stop being so emotional and difficult," he said. "She said consequences are the only way to make you listen." The room had gone very quiet. "You talked to her about me?" Small shrug, shoulders barely moving. The coldest gesture I had ever seen in my life. "She knows how to handle you." Here is what happened to my body in the following 3 seconds. My hands, which had been holding the bouquet, went completely still. Not clenched. Still. The way hands go when the nervous system has something more important to do than grip. My chest went flat and clear. The way a lake goes flat before a storm. Not empty, just waiting, every molecule oriented. My vision narrowed. Not like tunnel vision, more like focus. The specific kind of high-resolution clarity that I imagine people describe after near accidents. I had spent my entire life managing my mother's room. I had spent 3 years managing Daniel's version of the same room. I had been apologizing first and staying calm and keeping the peace and making everyone comfortable at my own expense since I was 11 years old and my father died, and I was alone in that house with Catherine. I was 29 years old. I was done. I turned and faced the room. "My mother hit me last night." I said it not loud, but clear. The kind of clear that carries no laughter this time. Nothing. I reached up with one hand and touched the edge of the bruise beneath my concealer. Just touched it. Just lightly. So there was no possible ambiguity about what I was referring to. A few people in the front rows visibly flinched. And apparently my fiancé thinks that was a lesson I needed. My mother rose from her chair so fast it scraped against the floor. "Olivia!" Her voice was diamond hard and pearl smooth simultaneously. "That is enough." "No," I said. "This conversation is years overdue." I watched her face do the thing it always did when control slipped. The quick recalibration, the eyes sweeping the room, the tiny reorganization of her features into something more sympathetic, more concerned, more "look how I'm trying to manage my difficult daughter." She was very good at it. She had been doing it my whole life, and she had never once had to do it in a room full of witnesses while I was holding documentation. I reached into the bouquet. The envelope was where Megan had tucked it, between the 3rd and 4th gardenia from the right. I pulled it out. I walked to Reverend Holloway, who had not moved, who was standing at her position with the specific stillness of a professional person, encountering something outside her pre-ceremony briefing. I placed the envelope in her hands. "There are photographs, text messages, and a professional letter inside," I said. "From my therapist. If you'd hold those for now, I'd appreciate it." Reverend Holloway looked at the envelope. She looked at me, she took it. I turned to Daniel. I took off my ring. It was a beautiful ring. A round solitaire and a pave band, chosen together, sized correctly. Everything it was supposed to be. I held it for one moment, feeling the weight of it, and then I placed it in his open palm. "You don't get to stand beside me after supporting the person who hurt me. This wedding is over." The room was absolutely still. A kind of still that costs something. The kind that means 100 people are holding their breath. Daniel stared at the ring. He looked up. His expression had moved through irritation and arrived somewhere unexpected. Something I can only describe as genuinely bewildered. Like a man who had run a calculation that had always come out the same way and was now looking at a different answer and could not identify where the error had entered. "Olivia, don't do this." "I'm already doing it." My mother had switched to anger. I could see it. The controlled surrender of composure in favor of force. The decision that the room was already lost and the only move left was intimidation. "You are humiliating this family," she said. I had heard that sentence or versions of it for 20 years. I knew its topography. I knew exactly how it felt to have it land. The particular collapse. The sudden certainty that she was right and I was the problem. The reflexive urge to apologize and fix and smooth. I waited for that feeling. It didn't come. "I'm telling the truth," I said. "If that embarrasses you, that's yours to carry." Aunt Linda was in the 3rd row. She had gotten there early, arrived before my mother, sat down, unfolded her program, and waited with the patience of a woman who had been waiting for this moment, or a moment like it, for 18 years. It's my father's funeral, when my mother had made Linda sit in the 2nd row instead of the 1st, and nobody had said a word about it because Catherine was the widow and nobody argues with the widow. She stood up. She walked past the people in her row, careful, deliberate, not fast, and she came to the front of the room and put her hand on my shoulder. Not a dramatic gesture, just a hand, warm and certain. "You're coming with us," she said. Quiet enough for me, loud enough for my mother to hear. My mother's eyes went to Linda, and for one moment, one unguarded, unperformed moment, her face showed something I had never seen on it before. Fear, not of Linda specifically. Fear of the room. Fear of the shape of this, of what it looked like, of the envelope in Reverend Holloway's hands, of 100 witnesses and a daughter who had stopped managing and started documenting. I looked out at the guests, flowers, candles. 100 people in their good clothes with their programs on their laps. A caterer in the back with 4 courses already plated. "The food is ready," I said. "You're welcome to stay, celebrate something else today." It started with one person. A woman near the middle. I didn't know her well. She was a colleague of Daniel's. She started clapping slowly, almost tentatively, like she was testing whether it was allowed. Then 2 more. Then a sound I didn't expect. Real sustained applause. Not the uncomfortable kind. Not the kind people give when they don't know what else to do. The kind that means something. Daniel tried one more time, I'll give him that. He tried. Olivia? His voice had moved through irritation and bewilderment and arrived finally at something that almost sounded like pleading. Don't throw away our future over a misunderstanding. I looked at him. I took my time with it. I wanted to really see him. Not the version of him I had built from hope and habit, but the man who had heard that my mother hurt me and said, "We'll deal with it after the ceremony." The man who had stood at an altar and smiled at the woman who'd hit me like they were in on a joke together. The man who had looked at the coldest thing I'd ever seen in his own face and called it handling me. It's not a misunderstanding, I said. I turned toward the door. It's a warning, and I'm finally listening. What happened after was messier than the stories usually tell you. There's no version where the aftermath is clean. Megan stayed at my side for the rest of that afternoon, fielding texts, managing the caterer, making sure Aunt Linda had a glass of water. The venue had a small back room, and that's where I sat for 40 minutes while the reception went on. Some guests stayed, genuinely ate the salmon and drank the champagne. Some cried. Reverend Holloway came and sat across from me and set the envelope on the table between us. You were very composed, she said. Her voice was measured in the way of someone who had seen a lot of things in the course of officiating ceremonies and had learned to process them quietly. Thank you for holding that, I said, nodding at the envelope. I'd like to make sure it gets to the right people, she said carefully. If that's something you're considering. I was considering it. The next morning, I contacted Detective Maria Santos of the Claremont Police Department. She was a 15-year veteran who worked family violence cases. I was referred to her by Linda's attorney, a woman named Gretchen Park, who had practiced family law in the county for 20 years and who, when Linda called her from the parking lot of my wedding venue, had answered on the second ring. I sat across from Detective Santos in her office at 10 in the morning on a Monday. I put the envelope on her desk. She went through each item without comment, taking careful notes. When she got to Dr. Nambai's letter, she read it twice. How long has this pattern been going on? She asked. My whole life, I said, but I've been documenting it for 3 years. I pulled out my phone. I opened the Notes app. I turned it to face her. She looked at 43 entries. She scrolled slowly through them, not rushing. Is this backed up? She asked. 3 places, I said. She looked at me for a moment over the top of the phone. Then she wrote something down. The process that followed was not fast. My mother's attorney. She had one on retainer. Because of course she did. Sent a letter to Detective Santos within 72 hours describing the incident as an accident and noting that my mother had no prior record. Gretchen Park filed a formal report referencing the photographic evidence and Dr. Nambai's documentation. Detective Santos made contact with 3 witnesses from the wedding venue, guests who had seen my face and had heard Daniel's comment from the altar, and collected their statements. One of those statements came from Reverend Holloway herself, who had been officiating ceremonies for 17 years, and who wrote that she had never, in her professional experience, witnessed a groom make a remark of that nature during a wedding ceremony. The charge that was eventually filed was misdemeanor domestic assault, specifically the application of force resulting in visible injury to a family member. My mother's attorney negotiated. Gretchen Park did not let them negotiate very much. The outcome was a fine, a mandatory 12-week intervention program, and a restraining order that I applied for and received, which required my mother to maintain a minimum distance from me for 1 year. It wasn't prison. I know some people wanted it to be prison, but it was official. It was documented. It had her name on it. And it was real in a way that all the private things that had happened over 29 years had never been allowed to be real, because there was never a room full of witnesses, and there was never an envelope, and there was never a woman who was finished managing. Daniel sent one email 3 weeks after the wedding. Subject line, "For what it's worth." It was 4 paragraphs. The first one apologized. The second one explained, "I didn't realize the extent of it. I thought I was helping you manage the relationship. I didn't understand what I was being part of." The third one said he had started therapy. The fourth one said he hoped I was okay. I read it once. I saved it to a folder. I didn't respond. I started therapy twice a week with Dr. Nambai instead of once. I moved into a rental in the same neighborhood as Aunt Linda, who lived 15 minutes away and came by on Sundays for coffee with a consistency that felt like something I had been waiting for without knowing I'd been waiting for it. I stopped performing. That's the only way I can describe the main change. I stopped spending energy managing the rooms I was in, anticipating the reactions, pre-adjusting my own responses to protect everyone else's comfort. It turns out there's a lot of space in a life when you stop doing that. 8 months after the wedding, I got a text from an unknown number. One line. "I know what Mom did was wrong. I've always known. I'm sorry I never said it." No name. But the phrasing, the specific rhythm of it, the word Mom, told me exactly who it was. My cousin, raised in my mother's orbit. Years of watching and saying nothing. I stared at the text for a long time. Then I typed back, "I know. Thank you for saying it now." I don't know if that's the beginning of something. I don't know if I have the capacity for it yet. But I know that "thank you for saying it now" is something I could not have said a year ago. Because a year ago, I was still organizing myself around other people's ability to handle the truth. I'm not doing that anymore. There's a photo that Megan took on the morning of my not wedding. I'm sitting in the bridal suite in my dress, looking at my own reflection in the mirror. Megan is behind me, brush in hand, doing my makeup. She didn't tell me she took it. I only found out months later when she sent it to me. What I see when I look at it, a woman getting ready for something. The bruise is almost hidden. Almost. My hands are in my lap. My face is still. But my eyes are looking somewhere past the mirror, past the room, past the version of the story where I stay and manage and smooth and apologize. My eyes are looking at what came next. That's the image I think about when people ask me if I have regrets about how that day went. About the scene I made, the reception I derailed, the 100 people who watched me hand back a ring in a ceremony hall with good acoustics. I think about the envelope in the bouquet. The notes app with 43 entries. The woman who spent 20 years being told that truth-telling was the same as humiliation. She said, "I'm telling the truth. If that embarrasses you, that's yours to carry." And then she finally put it down.